Anyway, so hi everyone. I'm Natasha Toms. I'm an artist based in Pembrokeshire. I'm going to talk to you about my creative journey. Portraiture deals with likeness and the recognition of people known. Faces deal with the nameless. They include those dehumanized, like fugitives, branded as aliens. I've included this quote by Marlene Demar describing the commission she has recently completed for the Louvre, because Demar has been a big inspiration behind my work for this show, and it brilliantly reflects how I can feel, how I can feel quite alien amongst others, and having had a recent late diagnosis, feeling alien even to myself. The work submitted for the show was a breaking out of an established loop or pattern of behaviour that I positioned myself within through drawing on a series of mechanisms of avoidance. These extended to my art practice, and this work has enabled me to unpick areas I have struggled with in life and bring an awareness to how it affects my creative processes. I titled my piece in the show, "I Laughed at My Grandmother's Funeral," to reflect my experiences of falling foul of societal and socially accepted terms or expectations as someone with difficulties regulating emotions. When writing my submission for the exhibition, I realised that I had previously rejected a lot of my artwork, something that I struggle with still. This has led me to abandon or destroy artworks, including burning several sketchbooks. I've only really been an artist for a year and a half. Before then, I had been a student for over a decade. While I was a student, I could only really focus on being an art student, not an artist. This project has made me realise that the idea of making was more enjoyable for me than actually finishing an artwork, which often becomes a chore. This means that when I look back at my practice, I feel I don't really have a practice. I feel like I don't have a body of work, just attempts to resolve thoughts and a lot of loose ends. I've always just wanted to be a representational painter. When I was at university, I felt a real push towards abstraction, which I wholeheartedly leaned into, as this appealed to my want of destruction of my own work. I'm a painter, but I don't feel like a painter at all. If I was a painter, I would just paint, and I would paint what I want to paint. Instead, I have developed a whole process of distractions, when by the time I come to make the artwork, I can't start it. If I do start it, I hate the bit between starting and finishing. When it comes to finishing, I can't finish when I should, instead ruining any good bits of painting by painting too much, as I just can't leave it. That's if it gets finished at all. I never know which me will turn up to the canvas at any given time. Likewise, in social interactions, I don't know who I will be or how I will engage. My creative process has always focused on responding to historic art, and usually revolves around the representation of women, and more recently, hyper-focusing on on work by women artists. When engaging with images in the physical, sometimes I have moments of unexplainable attachment to an image. This was a phenomenon I couldn't put in words and spoke to within my PhD thesis. Unfortunately, I hadn't been diagnosed at this point, and I was trying to describe something which likely related to my neurodivergence. I recall during my viva, my examiners giving me quizzical looks when I told them that my experience of art freed my brain entirely of thought, something I have never otherwise experienced. After this experience occurs, I become obsessed with gaining as much knowledge about the artwork and the artist as possible. Through this process, I discover what I think and feel, and often learn more about myself. I need to be prompted, I need to feel an emotional reaction, something I find endearing, something I find disagreeable, something I find quizzical, and something I need to unpick. My current project deals with the restoration of a body for a head portrait of Lucy Walter, a woman born in the 17th century. During this, I've realised I'm deeply interested in the dynamics between an artist, their sitter, and how a portrait is formed. That gap between what was and what is now speculative and unknowable. This part of my process and need to research is to uncover clues to inform my response and to imaginatively reenact and somewhat mimic their process, to craft my own narrative within my own response. Reconstructing a woman's body and trying to circumvent the patriarchal baggage of art history has highlighted a disconnect for me surrounding the artwork I decide to make. I feel it never properly reflects me. It's just the thing I'm doing, not the actual thing, though. I've no idea what the actual thing is, and it is something that never seems to be achieved. I can be quite impressionable, and recently I've noted a few artists speak about oil paint purism. Having never considered this, it has made me question how and why I automatically turn to the medium of oil, and if, as I often do, avoid painting entirely, I will feel as though I should be painting instead. Is it because I spend a lot of time looking at artworks of the past, so an inward insecurity or perhaps rebellion dictates the want to follow that precedent? Or is it actually because I want to be an oil painter? I do know that these artworks of the past make me feel unworthy in some way. I don't quite have the authority and lack a sense of authorship. I feel like I don't quite have a voice or control within my practice. I find myself divided, confused, and wondering just how much the mask extends. Reconstructing a woman's body and trying to circumvent patriarchal baggage of art history has also raised a question about how I relate to expression and gesture in art, and facial expression and body language in social settings. In life, I've always had a feeling that I'm chasing my own tail and that I'm doing, or on the cusp of doing something wrong repeatedly. I've previously been told that I'm blunt or direct, outspoken, intimidating, and what I'm thinking is reflected on my face. Because of this, I now find that I really struggle socially, seemingly misreading and misunderstanding social cues and expectations. I believe the root of the artwork for this show comes from my interest in this statue of Niobe that is in the Uffizi, Florence, and how it was used as a source of inspiration for the Baroque artist Guido Reni. From Greek mythology, the statue depicts Niobe at the moment of grief during the murder of her children. Reni appropriated her expression, using it over and over in portrayals ranging from subjects such as the Magdalene, or Lucretia, or the Madonna. Sanitizing the expression of grief, appropriating the upward stare to denote to something much more in connection with an ethereal and pensive holiness. For him, each individual work was a meditation on the way to make real, for the viewer, the relationship between the divine and the mortal. This adaptability of expression really spoke to me, and I have started to focus on the subjectivity and confliction of what is really communicated and expressed through facial expression and body language, and how this relates to my own experiences and the way I interact with the world. Because of my experiences, I try to coexist as neutrally and passively as possible. Unfortunately, though, sometimes I get carried away and can become too talkative. Other times, I'm too distracted or aloof. Being lost in thought, I may exhibit a frown. When concentrated on listening, I might stare, and so I'm read as being angry. Sometimes I'm expressionless, and I'm read as being sad. At times I will laugh when I want to cry. Other times I will find something amusing and start to cry. Talking to this, I originally wanted to use faces from artworks that had previously affected me, or photographs of faces I found confusing or interesting, or old images of family. But I realised quickly that wasn't quite right, as I began to try and faithfully repicture the image I was using. Instead, I realised I needed to put pigment onto paper without a source image. Laying the paper onto my desk, I saturated it with water before dropping ink onto the page. 2 dots for eyes, a line for each eyebrow, a line down for the nose, and across for the lips. I purposely chose to work with paper and ink as a new process to experiment and somewhat rid me of my aforementioned burdensome relationship with painting. I made the inks used for this series, which I sourced and cultivated myself. The red ink was made from a rock called red tufts that I borrowed from a beach in East Lothian. The brown ink was soot from my chimney. The black ink is oak gall from my oak tree. The orange ink is bracken from my garden. And the purple green ink is from red cabbage that I grew. I solely use my own pigments now, as historically artists or their studio assistants made their own pigments, so why can't I? I chose to use one pigment per face because the images became too much like portraits when using multiple, and I wanted the faces to be clear and direct. Likewise, the lack of hair refrained the faces away from portraiture, instead becoming floating expressions and masks. Each different ink has its own qualities. The red rock sort of had to be sculpted into place, whereas the orange ink from Bracken happily swirled across the page and had to be mocked back. Although these faces are imaginary, some remind me of people I've known or faces found in art. I find it interesting that there are faces that seem to reoccur a few times in the series. The use of paper meant I had limited capacity to overdo it before the paper would begin to break down. The series then accumulated as quickly appearing apparitions with no room to overthink or overprocess. The gridded formation of the images attempts to communicate my sense of anxiety in the face of social encounters and the inevitable replay during rumination after the fact, but also to communicate the divide between what is exhibited in my face while processing my surroundings as my thoughts and emotions race. To conclude, this exhibition has provided me the opportunity to dig deep into my own processes, familiarising myself with my own alienation in order to make some sense of myself. Thank you.